Hello and welcome back to NV Fine Art Studio. I'm Nina. This is another episode of Watercolor Where to Begin, and today we are talking about the king and the queen of this kingdom, the tonal values. In watercolor we work on a two-dimensional surface, such as paper or board, but we want to create an illusion of a three-dimensional space. We want it to look like a window into a different reality. Tonal values are one of the most important elements to help you to create this illusion. Tonal values are responsible for bringing depth and volume into the painting. In this tutorial, we will be discussing what a tonal value is, different value, same color, different value, different colors, practicing seeing values in color, consistencies of paint versus tonal value, how to achieve different tonal values in practice. What are the most common tonal values for things like sky, land, water, and things like that? First, let's talk about what a tonal value is. In simple words, a tonal value is how light or how dark a color is. It sounds incredibly simple, isn't it? But in reality, it is the most complex topic in the whole subject. This is the most difficult concept to grasp if you're a beginner. Let's see if you can guess what is lighter and what is darker. Here's an example. Which inner rectangle is lighter and which one is darker, you think? Number 1 or number 2? The reality is they are the same tonal value. Our brain tricks us. We always see things in relation to each other. This is definitely deceptive, but not if you assess each shape separately and label it with your light or middle or dark tone. Use only 3 at the beginning. Do not worry about fine-tuning at this point at all. This is what I always talk about in my demonstrations. Squint your eyes to the point that everything gets very blurry. Then think what is the lightest in this area. Leave it out or paint it with the light value to get rid of the white of the paper. Paint the rest with the middle tonal value. Try not to go too dark with the middle values, otherwise it will push you to get super dark with your darks. As soon as your middle tonal value shape is done, even if it doesn't make any sense at the moment, most of the time it doesn't. You probably heard the saying, it gets ugly before it gets beautiful in watercolor. As soon as your middle tone is done, squint your eyes again and look for the darkest darks. As soon as you put the darks in, the depth and the light magically appears. I like to say watercolor is an exercise of painting shadows. There are steps that you take to paint, and every consecutive step is darker than the previous one. The tricky part is to paint every new dark in the correct tonal value and consistency. As soon as you grasp the tonal values, your work will be no different to any professional artist. The brushwork, the colors, the composition, it is all personal preference and style, but tonal values, they're either right or wrong. Now let's talk about different tones of the same color. I already said that tonal value is not a singular thing. It is a spectrum. It is a range from white to black. A neutral tint color, its variation of black, is actually a really good color to show you as an example, as it gets from black to lightest light. Some other colors don't have this, but we will talk about it in the next chapter. First, we need to understand that different tonal values are not different colors. The color is always the same. It's just this shade, the darkness, that changes. There are a few different scales that you can follow. The 10-step scale, the 5-step, and the 3-step scales. The scale of 10 tones. It varies from light range, tone number 1, 2, 3, and 4, middle value range, 5, 6, and 7, and the darks, 8, 9, and 10. This is an ultimate scale with a very soft gradient. Value 1 is the white of the paper. Value 2 is off-white. I also call it a dirty water or tinted water. There is so little pigment there that it barely leaves any residue on paper. Tonal value 3 is the proper light value. This is where you start seeing the actual color in the water. To achieve tonal value 3, you need to dip your brush into the paint and you actually start seeing and feeling the paint resistance on the palette. This is the value that I commonly use for the first wash. Tonal value 4 is the darkest of the light value range. This is a transitional value into the middle value range. I usually use it in my first wash to put an emphasis on an object in focal point or bring an object closer to us, for example, top of the sky or the foreground, or paint objects in the background wet on wet for soft edges. The values between 5 and 10, the middle and dark tonal values, are commonly used for the second and third washes. I personally prefer to paint alla prima and not separate painting the middle and dark tonal values. If I need a dark tone, I go and paint it straight on top of the first wash. The benefit of painting alla prima is that there is one less layer, so more chances to get that area clean and fresh. This is particularly important for the darks. One wrong step and they get muddy. So, value 5 is the lightest of the middle and dark range. This is a value that needs to be used with caution. It is only dark enough to paint over the lightest values, such as 2 and 3, but it's too transparent to paint over value 4. Value 6 is the proper middle value tone, most commonly used throughout the painting. This is your most typical half-tone gray. When you look at it, you cannot tell if it's light or dark, it's just gray. Value 7 is a transitional value into darks. I usually use it in the areas where I need a soft transition from middle to the darker shadows. Then the darkness. Value number 10 is obviously black. It is used as the darkest dark, mostly wet and dry for the little details in the focal area. Number 9 is almost black, the paint with just a touch of water in it. Number 8 is the most commonly used value for the dark shadows, especially in combination with 9. This scale is quite complex and many artists use the scale of 5 tones instead: white, quarter tone, half tone, 3/4 tone and black. The white is obviously anywhere between the white of the paper and dirty water. The half tone is anywhere between the 3 and 4. The half tone is your typical value 6. The 3/4 tone is anything between 7 and 8, and the darks are your black and almost black. Now let's talk about the scale of 3 tones: light, middle and the darks. If you're a beginner and trying to figure this out, do not go past the scale of 3, no matter how tempted you get. I'm sure you're struggling to keep even one tone consistent or understand what shape in what value belongs to where. I would even suggest practicing making a tonal value scale before complicating it with real-life situations. I know it's boring, don't substitute your painting, but just add it as a warm-up before each painting. Think about it as throwing some paint around. When you had a good practice and you can consistently achieve the same light, middle and dark values, I would start practicing on a simple objects. Prepare a puddle of light value, middle value and darks on your palette. For my light value, I will be using the dirty water from the container. Cover it all in light value. Then add a middle value shape. Then add the darks. If you want a slightly more complex shape, you can try a tree, for example. It doesn't matter what shape you pick, the process is always the same. Light value first, then add the large middle value shape, and then the dark details. When you're happy with achieving 3 tonal values, you can progress to 5. The good thing about the 5-step scale is that each tonal value is 2 tones darker. So, if you paint them one on top of the other, you will not get things muddy. I did a monochrome demonstration this week for the creative tier on my Patreon. We painted a tree in a park in only sepia and a bit of lunar black for texture. We followed the same process there, starting from light values and slowly progressing to black for the darkest shadows in the tree and people in the focal area. If you want to practice values or just simply like the subject and want to paint along, please find me there. The link will be in the description below. We talked about different values of one color. Now let's talk about different values of different colors. I mentioned before that the darkness of color is relative. If you think this is not confusing enough, try adding the relative perception of hues of colors. When we talk hues, we usually use the term warm or cool. For example, red is warm and blue is cool. The tricky part here in relation to darkness is that cool colors tend to recede and warm colors tend to come forward. The cool colors perceived darker, for example as shadows, and warm colors perceived lighter, illuminated by the sun. The most common mistake I see is when people paint sky and use a blue cool mixture too light and the orange or yellow, the warm mixture, too dark. It is normal to think the more saturated the yellow is, the brighter it will look, but the more saturated means a darker tone. This is my Mystery Creek demonstration. If you look at the sky, it has the appearance of late afternoon, with the last rays of sun coming from behind the trees. But in reality, it's just a piece of paper with the correct values used in a way to achieve this effect. The warm tones are light in value and the blue tones are a little darker. This is the black and white version of this. The warm tones are light and the blue and purple are darker in value. If you want to practice to understand color versus tone, I have two suggestions. Firstly, you can use your phone. Open camera, set on monochrome, and when you practice making different values, look through the camera. Try using different colors as well. See if they are the same gray or not. What is lighter and what is darker. Try on purpose to achieve same value in different colors. Put a value scale tool next to it and see what number value this is. Then try to guess looking at the scale tool first and then check with your phone. If you don't want to use the phone, you can just do it with your eyes. Try to visualize the tones next to each other and see if one looks like a highlight or a shadow next to the other. Try to ignore the color, just focus on the darkness. Start with very obvious areas in full sunlight with good contrast. There should be bright warm tones highlighted by the sun and dark cool tones shadows. Then only focus on the area in shadow. There is not much contrast there. The tones will be closer in values to each other. Squint your eyes, ignore what the object is, and only think what is lighter and what is darker. You can do the same on paper. Start with very obvious light yellow and dark blue. Get them closer and closer and closer in value, eventually crossing the middles and going opposite to darker yellow and lighter blue. It definitely takes practice to start seeing little differences in values, but eventually you will know in your mind's eyes how the combination of different colors look in different values. I think it's best if you stop right here. I believe there is enough information for you to digest and have a go at it, practicing for a couple of weeks. Next time we will continue on this topic and we'll discuss the areas that are completely ignored by many, but absolutely crucial. The value versus paint consistency, how to practice to achieve different tonal values on paper, what are the most common tonal values used, for example for the sky, for horizontal surfaces such as road, sandy beach, ocean, and things like that. If you want to practice what we discussed today on a full-scale painting, I have over 6 real-time demonstrations on Patreon. I try my best to explain every single detail, what I do and why, starting from the sketch, right through brushes, paint use, tonal values, paint consistencies, and so on. I also have a private group on Facebook where you can submit your work for feedback or even give us a photo for the next demonstration to paint together. If you want to be part of our All Things Watercolor Club or just simply like my style of painting, please find me there. If you like this tutorial and want to see more, please subscribe and share. It will help my channel to grow and reach wider audience. This is all for today. Until my next video, goodbye.